What's up, guys? How the hell are we doing? This is our brother's computer today. But there's another computer. Come on, guys. Like I said, in the last video, I'm using my electronic toaster. Right, man, this phone is just trash. It's tough. Tough, so it's almost impossible to export a long video. In just a few days on this damn phone, man. Unfortunately, right guys? My phone can't handle exporting these giant videos, like over an hour long, but anyway. Right, let's stop wasting time and start this adventure. Damn, imagine yourself being sent to a world with a survival rate of 5%, man. And to top it off, with a glitched system that doesn't let you pass level 5. And the only way for you to return to your world is to defeat a god. This is the story of our protagonist. This guy right here, he was sent to a world called Latna, his goal. In this world is simple. Survive, I mean. Not that simple. Either, right? Our protagonist is terrified, especially since he doesn't know why he was sent to this world, however. He doesn't have time to think about that, because the dog Hayes facing charges straight at him. It goes all out, but he grabs a rock that was nearby, hits the dog's mouth, and out of nowhere, a system interface appears in front of him, saying that this monster Hayes fighting is a level 1 hellhound, the lowest level monster in this world. The system keeps saying those basic tutorial things, like how he can increase his level by gaining experience from eliminating monsters, and blah blah blah. And in the meantime, he got distracted. And getting distracted in this world is the same thing as dying, man. But first of all, how did our protagonist end up in this world? I don't know, but we are going to find out right now one day. Our protagonist was waking up normally. Since he had been discharged from his military service, long story short, he became a slacker. So, he felt he had the right to relax a bit. After all, the guy isn't made of iron. Right. He believed that after his military service, he would be able to return to his social life. However, nothing changed. Right? Because he just stays in his room. Sleeping, I mean, doing nothing, but completely out of nowhere. A black snow appears around him. A dimensional suction. What the hell was that? Am I dead? One of the crazy guys? Over there, who I think is the god? Says there are 7 billion candidates, and thanks to those 7 billion, they were able to find so many chosen ones. But to our protagonist, that makes absolutely no sense. Chosen for what? What are they talking about? He even tries to see if it really was a god, but the only thing he can see is a white glow in front of him, or whatever that is, transmitting. The guide to all players, however, one of them there asks if Hayes sure about that. Because doing it this way, wouldn't it be a bit artificial? He says, and that only served to make our protagonist even more curious, right? And out of nowhere, our protagonist was pierced. Oh, I screwed up. What did you do? Damn, the guide is glitched. Screw it. If it was just an error, send him like that. Anyway, initiate the dimensional transport of the Chosen One. 398, and that's pretty much how he ended up in Latna. Back to our protagonist. He crushed the dog to pieces with a rock, man. And since he defeated that dog, he received 13 experience points. And of course, all of this makes our protagonist angry, right? But he was only discharged from his military service just 3 months ago. And to make it worse, Hayes also a virgin, right? How sad attention. You have less than a 5% chance of surviving in Latna? With your current capabilities, do you want to kick the bucket? And obviously that makes our protagonist even more pissed off, right? Seriously, this crazy guy kidnaps. The guy sends the guy to a world where no one survives for even a day, and still has the nerve to ask. If the guy wants to kick the bucket, then it's impossible, damn it. But that doesn't matter now. Because if he dies in this world, it's game over for now. He needs to survive and think of a way to get out of there. The Chosen One noticed his determination and fighting spirit. His strength was amplified, so the system told him to choose his skill. In this case, his class. Right, the first one is the warrior class. a close-arranged class that uses various martial arts. But since he almost lost his life last time, he decides to choose the mage class, where he can learn up to 6 magic attributes. However, it's not all roses, right, you guys? His choice was rejected. You do not possess the necessary capabilities for this class. So since that's how it is, in this case, he decides to choose the magic swordsman class. But the same message appears. He doesn't have the necessary capabilities for this class. And it was the same thing with the other classes. So there's no way around it, right? He'll have to stick with the warrior class anyway, especially since it was also the only one. Left, right. Now that he got his class, he needs a weapon to be able to fight, right? That way. The system opens a weapon selection window. And since he doesn't like close-range fighting, he needs a long-range weapon. Thinking about that, he chooses the spear. So, he clicks on the spear and a sword drops. Motherfucking system. Then, at that moment, our protagonist remembers the words of that god, that there was an error in the guide, to put it simply. He's screwed, but he won't give up so easily. His will to live is greater. At least a sword is better than a rock, right? But before, he tries to hunt the monsters. He needs to train, right? So, he swings the sword. Back and forth, and back again, damn it. I'm a piece of shit, brother. And with that, 7 days pass, and in these 7 days, he asked the system countless times if there was any way for him to return to his world, but he didn't receive any answer. Could this be because of the system bug? I don't know. Well, see. Because at this moment, he is fighting to stay alive. From the looks of it, in this region, where he finds himself, the monsters are always hellhounds. And in the meantime, one thing our protagonist noticed is that in this world, monsters can also level up, you know? But after he swings his sword, the hound uses this opportunity to attack him. He is starting to get used to the hound's attack, just like the hound is getting used to his movements. What a mind-boggling achievement, bro, then. He charges at the hound, but the hound dashes away easily. Now it's the hound's turn to attack, however. Our protagonist slashes the hound's son. That's how he defeats the hound and learns a new skill, thrust. He doesn't learn how to wield the sword, right? But this thrust skill, he can execute easily, thanks to, and researching further, he discovered that hellhound meat is a great source of protein containing fat and amino acids. And there's also the hound's blood, right? Containing acidity, don't know what that is, carbohydrates, fiber, and essential minerals, thus serving as a drink, right? In other words, hellhounds can be considered the perfect food. And this leaves our protagonist a bit curious, right? Because this place was clearly created artificially. He's sure there's a reason for them having sent him to this world, since it makes no sense anymore. For them to have sent our protagonist to Latna, there's no reason at all. Where on earth were the others sent? As he says this, the system opens a notification window. You may leave your current area, the Rocky Mountains, as soon as you reach level 5 and reunite with the other chosen ones. This place where he finds himself is the starting zone, a safe zone where the mortality rate is low and experience gain is effective, an area where the learn about their situation and evolve to level 5. And as soon as he reaches level 20, he will be able to complete the map of Latna, thus being able to travel to the continent of Latna. A fucking system, why didn't you tell me this? Now, that means it's a beginner zone, right? So, if he can reach level 5, he will be able to form a party with the other chosen ones and finally manage to reach level 20. And as soon as he reaches level 20, he will be transported to the continent of Latna, where the true battle begins. At least that's what he thought, right? He even tries to ask the system what he has to do on the continent of Latna, but since the system is glitched, it errors out. So He was right. The hellhounds were actually getting stronger. As he leveled up, that's an important fact. But can he really return to his home? Because he can't trust his guide. Especially since it's glitched, right? So if he wanted to meet with the other chosen ones and get more information, he needs to reach level 5 after that. He went around looking for more hellhounds, thus beginning the hunt. And since the hellhounds get stronger, as he levels up, it keeps getting harder and harder to defeat them, so he kept repeating this for several days. Defeating the hellhounds, in constant evolution, he fought, was wounded, sent several hounds to the afterlife, ate a lot, slept well, fought or was wounded, killed, ate, fought, was wounded, killed, enough. And just like that, 27 days pass, man. And finally, after a long time, he managed to level up to level 4. And in the meantime, he obtained 3 skills: thrust, lateral slash, and vertical slash. And not to mention his body, right? Which started to feel the effects of the stats. I'm starting to think that this protagonist is taking that juice, right? Look at the results Hay's getting, right? Even the sword. That was hard to lift at the beginning. Now he wields easily, man, in this world. The results of his hard work are noticeable. At least that's what he thought. Because out of nowhere, his level, which was 4, goes back to level 1, man. No, it was just an error from this piece of crap system. Let's take a little look at the stat window. Ah, son of a bitch system, ha ha ha. The guy spent 27 days, man, just to go back to the beginning and the end, dude. Damn, honestly, if there's a protagonist unluckier than this one, it'll change my name. To surprise whoever is listening, right? Right, but it seems like something is wrong. Because if his level dropped, shouldn't his stats have dropped too? Because his skills also remain there, so this means that the hellhounds also went back to level 1? So, does this mean he can increase his stats in an easier way? Right, wrong. Even if the hellhounds go back to level 1, they keep getting stronger. Because of our protagonist's stats not having dropped, he keeps putting his life at risk in every fight. So he tries again and again, and over. Times he keeps killing the hounds that kept getting stronger. And even so, he keeps checking his experience in the hope of finally managing to get past level 5, like this. Only 77 experience points are missing. For him to manage to reach level 5, they say 7 is a lucky number. And while trying to pass level 5, 7 years pass, man. But in those 7 years, he never managed to get past level 5. In this world, the chosen ones don't age, and their wounds are healed in just 1 day, and that's thanks to their recovery skills and always going back to level 1 doesn't affect his stats at all. But since he can't get past level 5, he didn't learn any other skill besides. Out of the 3 he already has, right? And out of nowhere, while he was talking, a giant bear dog appears. The system informed him that the monsters serve to help the chosen ones become stronger. They weren't there to be killed. How do you kill something that's already dead? Well, the same thing can be said for him. It's a certain place that God from the beginning was distributing guides to other chosen ones. In the same way it happened with our protagonist back at the start, but while he was walking around there, he notices the world. It's kind of ruined. This world is exactly our protagonist's world. And from the looks of it, this world that our protagonist is in was completely discarded. Man, poor guy. That makes him a bit curious. Because our protagonist is logged in at this moment in Latna. Poor guy. Man, besides the guy's guide being bugged, the guy was forgotten sometime later. He was waking up in his bed. Did he go back to his world? It was obvious he hadn't. Right. He was almost pressing the button that sends him to the afterlife. He wakes up. Apparently he fell off a cliff. while he was fighting a hellhound, and with that, 10 years have already passed. He gets a bit sad because not even falling off a cliff killed him, and the same thing happened again. After so much effort, he went back to level 1. Can he really say Hayes living a life? Will he just give up like that? However, out of nowhere, he hears something coming toward him. This bug made him suffer many times. He thinks, would he be sent back? If he kicked the bucket? If Hayes going to die, wouldn't it be better to do it in a way that makes it worth it? And after being stuck in Latna, for 10 years he gave up on counting the days. He wonders how many years have passed. Since then, 5, 7 years. And in the meantime, he ended up developing a hobby. Now, he has something to work on. Because surviving alone in this world isn't such an easy task, especially in this harsh environment. He can't be lazy. This is his reality. And since he can't change his situation, he decided to devote himself to the things that Hay is capable of doing. And since there's nothing but rocks and boulders in this place, he simply built a small house. For himself, man, and in these last few years, he no longer lives with anger. But he doesn't have time to think about that because suddenly a hellhound appears in front of him. The monster charges at him with a swipe. But before it knows it, it's lost its paw. 3 years. It took me 3 years to build this house, and you dare turn it into dust. Maybe I should build a palace with your bones. These hellhounds that have been appearing lately, they're very noisy and taste terrible. He says, as the dog lunges at him. It prepares a fireball. But from our protagonist, hunting these dogs so much, he learned the strategies. Most effective for defeating them, first, they start with a big attack and hit our protagonist dead in, however. Since it's impossible to dodge the dog's fireball, he just readies his body and blocks it with his strength. The only thing that dog's attack was good for was to singe the tip of our protagonist's hair. Man, look at the dog's surprise at seeing its enemy calm. It starts conjuring lightning and fire magic. And since getting hit by that magic hurts, like hell, get out of here. He blocks by creating a massive wall of earth. Then, the final act. Hay's going to slash it. Wait, but before anything happens, our protagonist gives the dog a massive kick to the mouth. And since our protagonist can't get past level 5, he hasn't learned any other skills. But then, I don't know. The 10,000 times he used vertical slash, horizontal slash, and thrust. He combined the 3 skills, thus creating cross. Impact. It's not a real skill. But no monster has survived after he uses it. And finally, he survived. Another day, right? Now, going back to that guy. What is this, honestly? I don't know if Hay's a god. And with that, he sees the picture of our protagonist, still logged into Latna. He wonders why our protagonist is still there, so he thinks about it for a bit. The 5th generation is operating in Jaren Latna, the 4th in Rara Latne, and the 3rd in Tila Latne. Holy crap. So, it's been 22 years since our protagonist was sent to this world. Man, this left the guy a bit confused. Right? Because if that person finds out, Hay's screwed, and also, he can't just eliminate our protagonists. So what is he going to do? That person Hay's talking about must be the real God, right? I don't know. Well, see then, he opens our protagonist's status window, weight level. For how on earth did this pest survive all this time? He doesn't know what happened. But this should work, returning to our protagonist. He was eating that hot dog meat, right? Get it? Hot dog? Dog meat, right? So, he takes a look at his attributes. At first glance, he says, "What a piece of crap, man." But those aren't his real attributes. He asks the system to display his extra attributes. Damn, this is the most unique level 4 I've ever seen. You wonder how strong that is, buddy? You are the most overpowered level 4 in the world. He wonders how long he will have to live. Like this, but out of nowhere. While he was thinking, a light appears in the sky. And finally, after suffering so much, he finally reaches level 5, just like that. He is sucked in and sent to the continent of Latna. Wait, but what do you mean he suddenly leveled up? It was sent to the continent of Latna. But for him to be sent to this continent, didn't he need to be at level 20? But hold on, we're about to find out. Why? Do you guys remember? That big-headed guy back there? Well then, he was breaking something. There, honestly, I have no idea what it is. And after he broke that little cube, our protagonist leveled up and was sent to the continent. Just because he believes our protagonist won't survive on the continent. Just by being level 5, you know? Oh boy, just you wait and see. And as soon as our protagonist arrives on the continent, a being that looks like a dragon gets angry. Because they want to stop falling from the sky. Our protagonist, who used to be in a place where there were only rocks and a horrible sky, thinks, this forest is perfect, damn it. It's also a bit strange, right, because he suddenly leveled up to level 5, and that's how he was sent there, and also, he gained a new communication skill. But didn't he need to be level 20 to go to the continent of Latna? Right, that crazy guy over there wants to get rid of our protagonist. Like that, so he did it. He even tries to ask the system why he was sent. There maybe the system skipped it for him, right? But obviously, it wouldn't be that easy, right? And of course, an error pops up, and out of nowhere, a new quest window appears. Final. Quest: eliminate one of the 6 deities of Latna. If he manages to complete this quest, he will gain eternal youth and immortality. Second, be sent back to his own world, with his attributes intact. And third, he will be able to make 3 wishes. And finally, the system gives him some tips. Right, the system tells him to keep his otherworlder identity a secret. Because if they find out Hayes from another world, Hayes a goner. And the second tip is for him to register at a hunter's guild in the corporate city of Omphal. But while Hayes looking at the quest, in the system, completely out of nowhere, a dragon appears there, man trying to bite his ass. He got unlucky, man, because out of all the monsters that could appear, a dragon suddenly shows up, you know? You demonic being from another world. How dare you enter my forest? Are you planning to face me unarmed? What an unlucky bastard, man. He needs to get his hands on his sword. No pun intended, but he doesn't have time to think. Because the dragon shoots a blast of fire right at him, man, however. He easily dodges, and then he charges at the dragon unarmed. Seriously? You know, you're ridiculous. Damn, bro. In a certain place, there was a shining dragon who lived with the celestial dragon dynasties of the E-Trade Kingdom. This dragon's name was Ephir, and she was the great pride of the riders. However, a great ordeal befell Ephir, coming in the form of the kingdom's prince, who whined about wanting to kill her, but riding a dragon isn't such an easy task, and in the end, the prince kicked the bucket, and poor Ephir's rider was executed. She even managed to escape with the help of the other kind riders, and the poor dragon living in the forest didn't even have time to mourn, because the forest was where most of the other worlders constantly appeared, but despite her training, she would never kill her opponents. So, was the gentle Ephir really the source of a terrible disaster? And it was around that time that countless other world hunters gathered to hunt our poor dragon, and after being seriously wounded, Ephir came to a conclusion. Leaving the other worlders alive was a bad idea, and after that, she said they kept showing up, so she had no choice but to plus. She isn't even a dragon, you know? She's a raven. Raven, I don't know. Dragons have 4 legs and their wings are located on their shoulders, while wyverns have wings on their front legs. In other words, she's a raven, But that's not the point here. How did she know that our protagonist was from another world? She says she can't tell just by looking. But when otherworlders die, their bodies disappear, not to mention that the people of Latna rarely enter the forest, So in that case, this means that no one will be able to find out his identity judging solely by his appearance. He asks, if this is the satire forest of the Galut Kingdom? She says the Galut Kingdom was destroyed a long time ago. Now it's known as the E-Trade Kingdom. You should have minded your own business. Why did you have to attack me, huh? Because you're an otherworlder demon? Who's a demon? But she said it wasn't her fault. It was the goddesses. Who said so? Which obviously leaves our protagonist a bit curious. Goddesses, give me the details. But I have a splitting headache. Is it okay if I go home to put on some medicine? You, Brett, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Do you want to get beaten up? Otherworlders started appearing in Latna 40 years ago, in the beginning. The Otherworlders and the people of Latna maintained a good relationship, but that didn't last long. The Otherworlders started slaughtering the people of Latna. To raise their levels, the most powerful ones gathered and created the Great Earth, a group with the objective of eliminating the goddesses. Also, the Otherworlders are extremely powerful, since, just like dragons, they can easily level up just by killing their opponents. And because of that, there was no way to face them, as they were led by someone of level. So before their arrival, Berold, the Sword King, Zenobia, the Archmage, Garhan the Terrible, Atolian, the Transcendentalist of life and death, the four heroes of the continent, massacred the Otherworlders in a flash, bro, and then the six goddesses blessed the continent, and Otherworlders are now considered demons who made a contract with the cruel demon god. That's why they are summarily executed, and obviously, this leaves our protagonist absolutely furious, right? Because he was kidnapped out of nowhere and was practically forgotten on a rocky mountain range for several years, and now, when he finally managed to get out of there, if anyone finds out Hayes from another world, the entire continent will turn against him. And the crazy part of it is that all of this happened long before our planet was even born, But he doesn't give a damn about that. Hayes going to make this demon god kick the bucket. Man, so you know how it is, right? I can't let anyone who knows my identity wander around. But she swears she'll won't tell anyone. Right, however. 5 days later, in the city of Amphel, a small town to the north of the Kingdom of Estras. It's actually a pretty spacious town, right? And from the looks of it, it also has a very large population. And on the plains of iPhone, this is located near a dungeon where countless monsters constantly appear. Thus, many hunters try to get rich quick. By risking their lives, the Hunters Guild. The people who go there are obviously hunters. Or obviously people who want to become one of them. Or also beings from another world, haha. As soon as our protagonist walks in, everyone thinks our protagonist is a hunter, I mean, the guy is built like a tank. Welcome. Sir, I don't recognize you. Is it your first time here? How can I help you? I want to become a hunter. After they hear that, everyone who was there gets ready to send our protagonist packing, man. Going back a few days before our protagonist went to the city, he asked the dragoness to help him. Damn. I forgot her name. He asked her to help him. Because if he goes to the city looking like this, obviously they will be suspicious of him too. Man, it looks totally suspicious, But she's a bit hesitant. Because even if she helps, he might just kill her, right? However, wasn't she always making everyone kick the bucket too? Because whether she wants to or not, she is a wanted beast, right? So because of that, she'll want to go around talking about him to other people, right? And not to mention, it's been a long time since Hayes had a decent conversation with anyone. And with that, she remembers the night she helped last year, and guys, you know how it is. Since her little heart softened, she decides to help him, but she tells him not to tell anyone about her. How about changing your clothes first? What the hell are you doing? Are you blind? Damn it, I'm changing. What's the problem? You're naked, damn it, that's the problem. But you're naked too. Ugh, I lost my appetite. After that, she starts explaining everything about the people in the city. Blah, 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 blah. The protagonist asks how he can meet the goddesses. She says that the goddesses rarely meet with other people, including the Latinians. In other words, he needs to be one of the 4 heroes, or have achieved a great feat, to be able to meet them and receive their blessings, so it's safe to say that the only way for him to receive a blessing is by becoming a hunter and hunting the monsters in the dungeons that were created by the demon god. The guide also mentioned that I need to become a hunter to be able to make a contract with the goddess. What the hell are you talking about? Are you blind? Damn it, blind your mom, there's nothing there. Then our protagonist realized he forgot, man, Hayes the only one who can see the system, so he explains to her right that it's a guidance system for humans from another world, this and that. She asks him to tell her what's written in the guide. After he tells her everything, she starts explaining to him everything. He needs to know about the guilds and hunters, because unlike other professions, hunters follow a more straightforward lifestyle. You know, like this? This causes a lot of suspicion because they are high level, and because of that, they need to be very careful. And since, like him, several other humans from another world followed the same path, now, it was a lot for our protagonist at the guild. Our protagonist was almost crapping his pants, you know? Because if they find out Hayes from another world, it's lights out, man. And in the midst of all this, our protagonist stammers a bit. And obviously, that leaves the receptionist a bit curious. Right. Welcome to the Hunters Guild of Omphal. So she asks if he wants to be transferred from another guild to their guild. Actually, no. I want to become a hunter. And obviously, everyone who was there goes on alert. Meanwhile, the others are whispering in the background that maybe he is an outsider, a human from another world. At this, our protagonist wonders if he made a mistake. Will he need to crush everyone? Well, see then. The receptionist asks him to put his hands on the general evaluation stone that was. There it gets tense, right, man? Wondering what his level will be. Little did he know, it's level 5. Right, so when it finally reveals level 5, the tense expression on everyone's faces becomes normal, you know, everyone bursts out laughing, man. Even the receptionist, man, look. It's just that normally humans from another world who go there are already at level 20 and always asked to become a hunter, even though they are level 20. In other words, they're using hacks, right, man? Who would have thought that our protagonist's bad luck of being level 5 infinitely would be his saving grace? I think so, right? So then, the receptionist says it costs 300x, which must be the currency of this world, right? And obviously, he robbed our little dragon, right? And with that, he registers as a novice hunter. And that way, if he levels up, he receives another badge. Well, now that he has managed to become a hunter, he needs to do quests to become a recognized hunter. So, the receptionist asks if he has a quest in mind, and obviously it would be the dungeons. But before he can say he wanted to go after the dungeons, an idiot shows up and starts trying to humiliate our protagonist, right? This idiot is Loud, a level 20 Seven hunter. And by the looks of it, the people there don't like him very much, man. And who would like a piece of crap like that, he says? He heard that the number of monsters in the dungeons was increasing. And because of that, they are attacking the nearby houses. Then the receptionist has the great idea to try to put our protagonist in his group, because his team was missing one person. And obviously our protagonist doesn't want to join the group of this idiot, right? But luckily for our protagonist, Loud already has someone in his group. To fill that empty space, this is Addis, a level 25 mage, that is what he says, right? But since our protagonist has the system, it shows that his real level is level 37. Man, I'm holding myself back for making a joke about his name. While our protagonist was seeing his real level, he takes a little look at our protagonist. But the idiot Loud says that he will make an exception for our protagonist, and blah, 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 blah. And guys, extras are all dumb, right? So he has the brilliant idea to try to take the sword of our protagonist, No homo, right? But obviously, that was going to happen. Right. The sword didn't even budge, Let go now. What the hell, man? Look at the difference in size from Loud to our protagonist. Man, the guy is built like a tank. While all this was happening, there was a certain person watching our protagonist from above. I finally found him, and out of nowhere, that crazy guy who was watching our protagonist says that with a body like that, he will be able to handle the level 10s. The name of this buff dwarf is Berkman. But obviously I'm going to call him a buff dwarf, right? He says that fighting won't be a problem. But if our protagonist destroys the guild, he will have to fight everyone. Right there, man. Our protagonist says he doesn't want to fight anyone. This makes that ugly, loud, pissed off man, saying that no one but him will use our protagonist, asking if he really thought he could manage to do anything with that level. In that, honestly, I really want to see this guy get wrecked, man. And of course, those words leave our protagonist a bit down, right? Because just registering at the guild as a hunter took half his money, man, just like that, man. But the buff dwarf comforts our protagonist, because for our protagonist to level up with a body like that, it'll be a piece of cake, man. From the looks of it, the dwarf Berkman was looking for someone with a muscular body, just like our protagonists. And with that, he invites our protagonist to join his party, because he knows that a muscular body like that isn't built overnight. And the only reason our protagonist is still a low level is due to his lack of experience, guys. Should I tell him, or will you guys? And obviously, our protagonist joins his party, right? The development of the city of Omfell is due to the monsters and the dungeons. Businesses and trade revolve around these monster hunters, and the city creates products using the monsters brought back by these hunters. And near the city, there are two main areas where hunts and Amphel are carried out. The first is the dungeon in the plains of iPhone, and the second is the entrance to the Satire Forest. There are also small villages near the forests. But since monsters rarely venture out of the trees, subjugation missions are rarely issued. However, there has been a large number of monsters attacking the edges of the forest lately, and because of that, a large number of hunters accepted the subjugation mission. In a certain place near the forest, Berkman and his party are fighting monsters called Devos. One of them charges at the buff dwarf. Man, but our buff dwarf blocks it, man. It's not for nothing that Hayes considered the best tank in Amphel, however. He can't defeat all of them alone, right? So that's when our buff old lady appears, man, crushing the monster. This is Amber Bonet, a level 20. One Lancer, she even teases him, saying it's time for the buff dwarf to retire. At that, she notices he got hurt. But he takes a quick look at her and tells her not to worry, guys. She blushed a little. But to ruin the old folks' moment, Yuri appears and heals his wounds. This is the buff dwarf's sister, a level 16 spiritualist, and also the team's healer. And for a brief moment, they forgot they're in a fight. Then, one of the monsters tries to attack our girl from behind. But that's when our young mage arrives and sends the monster to the afterlife. This is Humbert Kruthaus. A level 18 mage, Berkman's party is the number. One party when it comes to coordination and balance, and they don't just focus on attacking. They can also be called the most reliable party in Omphal. There's no better place to be. Right now, says our protagonist. But that's why it's so annoying. For him, right? Because the guy became their pack mule, man. Since our protagonist is level 5, they leave him out of the fight. At least they leave the weak monsters. For him, you know, and the good thing is, they share the spoils with our protagonist, which, if I'm not mistaken, are the monster cores. That can be sold. Everything was going fine. But out of nowhere, Loud came back. Right there at level 25. But he didn't finish the creature off. With the little stone, you know? He calls it projectile rock. And obviously, that's not a real skill. Right? And from the looks of it, this monster was a higher level monster. Out there, but the monster's level is very low. You should hunt higher level monsters. Then Yuri calls for our protagonist. Since they've already finished hunting the monsters, now it's time to harvest the crystals. Ian finds a crystal, and our protagonist says that if it were before, he would have vomited. But now, it's nothing to him. Right, especially since Hayes already done this with many hellhounds. Ian is impressed with our protagonist, but he says Hayes been doing this for over 20 years. Then she asks how old our protagonist is. He says Hayes, 24 years old. And taking advantage of the mood, she asks about his parents. And obviously he wasn't going to tell the truth. To them, right? Or head kick the bucket. Right then and there, so he invents an excuse. He says he was kidnapped 20 years ago, so he doesn't remember what his parents were like. Everyone starts crying. Try to console our protagonist, saying that Hayes part of the family now, and blah blah blah. And obviously, our protagonist is grateful, since they helped a low-level guy like him, but the old man. Berkman says that level doesn't matter, since Hayes been at level 25 for over 5 years, man. And that leaves our protagonist confused, right? And continuing on. Ian says there aren't many high-level monsters around there, with the exception of the monsters that stay in dungeons. We don't need to hunt stronger monsters around here, she says, since they'll never go to places like dungeons. At that, our protagonist says Hayes going to practice with his sword, but obviously Hayes going to see if that's true. Right, monsters only going up to level 25 at most. So the little mage decides to go with our protagonist, because Hayes worried about our protagonist. How cute, man, however. When he goes to look for our protagonist, he was already far away. Man, already in the forest. Our protagonist was running like crazy in the hope of finding some high-level monster, however. Everywhere he looks, there are only low-level monsters. Then he remembers the words of that dragoness whose name I forgot again. She said there's no monster stronger than her there in the Satire Forest. This breaks our protagonist's little heart. But it's strange because no low-level monster gives experience to our protagonist, you know, but out of nowhere, while he was thinking, he hears a sound a bit like the hellhounds. So he grabs onto a tree and swings like Tarzan. Man flies forward and arrives, destroying everything. And as soon as he gets there, he finds Otis without clothes. Guys, I have some news for you. We're all fooled. Hayes a man. Seriously. Ha ha ha. So guys, is he smashable or not? Smashable. What's up, guys? How are we doing in the last video? Our protagonist ended up discovering that in this forest, where he is, there are no strong monsters, you know? And to see if that was really true, he went deep into the forest to see with his own eyes. And there really were only low-level monsters, you know? But out of nowhere, while he was walking, there he heard a noise. Similar to the ones before, He didn't think he would be fighting, so he grabs onto a tree that was there and threw himself to the ground where he heard the noise. And as soon as he gets there, he found Addis. Without clothes, guys, I bet you guys that Hay's a dragon. Since there were no monsters, there he decides to leave, pretending he saw nothing. Addis finds this a bit suspicious, right? Because that's no place for a level 5, right guys? But he says he heard a noise and thought it was a monster. So he runs off, saying his group is waiting for him, but Addis, out of nowhere, shoots fire in front of our protagonist, telling him to answer. Did Addis understand? Addis shoots fire. No, right? He asks our protagonist if he really saw the monster, and if he doesn't tell, hell, but our protagonist puts out the fire on Addis's staff. Our protagonist says he doesn't know the reason why he is doing this, especially since he already said he doesn't know, right? And also, he asks why he and Loud keep belittling low-level people. She my bad, he says that it wasn't his intention. Right, but while all this was happening, Loud arrives and sees our protagonist holding Addis's hand, and he gets thinking they are doing those lewd things that you guys are thinking, you naughty ones. And after seeing this, he gets pissed off, right, boys? Should I tell him, or will you guys? Addis tells our protagonist to leave, because when Loud gets into this ridiculous pose, it's because Hay's getting ready to execute a technique, and in this pose, he doesn't hesitate. It's better to have put clothes on, right? Ah, right, I had forgotten. And after being completely ignored, he gets even more pissed off, right? So he charges at our protagonist with everything Hay's got. But to apologize to Addis for having seen certain things, he bows down, and the protagonist's sword hit Loud's balls. Damn, later on, the jacked dwarf and our protagonists were talking about this incident that happened to Loud. The jacked dwarf says, it wasn't our protagonist's fault. Right? Damn protagonist? That's just too much. Damn you. Crushed his balls a while. Later, UN finished healing Loud. But it seems like Hay's left with only one ball, guys. F for Loud's balls, guys. All the men went silent. It might have been Loud's fault. But the suffering he is going through is something unimaginable that no one will be able to ease. You destroyed my ball that same morning. Addis took Loud back to the city, and right after, Loud discovered the truth about her. Actually being a he, Loud, the one-balled found it hard to face him, and the monster that made that noise wasn't found. So it was forgotten, and after all that, 3 months pass in a certain place. In front of the satire forest, the jacked dwarf was saying that the one-balled Loud entered the dungeon. Alone, guys, our protagonist asks Amber if that's dangerous. She says that going to the dungeon at Loud's level is the same as biting the dust. But wasn't his level high? He asks, it might be, but Loud is used to fighting natural monsters. From the satire forest, however, the dungeon monsters are not natural to this world. They are creatures born in the dungeons, and the dungeons were created by the demon god. And that's why it's common to have monsters above level 30, or even monsters at much higher levels. So if these monsters are above level 30, maybe our protagonist can get high-level power. Right. He needs to go to the dungeon. Even if it's in secret, the jacked dwarf says that monsters aren't the only problem, because several humans from another world go there to hunt in secret. And also, the path to the dungeon. It is very rigorous. If it's that difficult, then why did the one-balled Loud go there then? Perhaps it's in the hope of finding a healing artifact. Right, certain items that can only be found in dungeons. Items that can take many different forms. And each of them has a different ability from one another, and according to rumors, one of those artifacts is capable of healing any kind of wound, guys. So it's possible that Loud is looking for this artifact to heal his balls, right? Haha, the crazy guy. is going to heal his ball, man? And after hearing this story about the artifacts, they go to sleep, right? I mean, not all of them, right? Because a while later, our protagonist went out to hunt. But he can't find any high-level monsters in the satire forest, right? So he has an idea to ask our little dragon about the monsters. Since she lives nearby, right? But completely out of nowhere. While our protagonist is walking there, a monster appears. There, man, what is that? He gets startled, right, man? Also, out of nowhere, a mutant cockroach appears. There, you know, wait, but aren't these monsters from the dungeons? So what are they doing? There, bro, and to help our protagonist, as always, right, the system says they are resistant to physical attacks, with blades, which isn't. Very good for our protagonist, right, since he uses a sword. But this is also great for our protagonist, right, because now he can test to see if those, many who are above level 30 will, really give him experience. Man, is the system trolling our protagonist? Bro, I don't know, but to test this, our protagonist charges at one of them and slices it in half, son. So if this thing was really lying to our protagonist, bro, look at this magic blade, huh? Magic blade? So dumb, no, stupid. Blades don't hurt us. We devour the blade's damage. What are you talking about? Another one bites the dust, son. Meanwhile, the last one left was running like crazy. Bro, but since our protagonist is a monster, you know, he catches up to him real quick, bro. In going to eat everything, however, out of nowhere, the little monster goes under a tree, and obviously, our protagonist won't let him escape. That easily, right? So, he rips the tree out with pure strength, son, and simply out of nowhere, a portal appears on the ground, bro, and to top it off, this portal leads straight to a dungeon, you know? And of course, that leaves our protagonist a bit curious, right? So he asks the little monster if it was the one that swallowed the portal, right? But it was obvious that it wasn't, right? Because these little monsters don't know how to use magic, you know? If it wasn't them, then who was it, since it doesn't know? There's only one thing left to do: destroy the portal. But before the little monster bites the dust, it says that no one can enter. Those are his orders? His? Who's you son of a bitch? It says it doesn't know who that person is, right? But if you pretend you didn't see anything, just don't let anyone enter that way. That person you're talking about won't find out. Hey, but it knows nothing. And inside the dungeon, there were some hunters fighting against the little monsters. Right, but they were having a really hard time, son. William, seeing that his partner was about to kick the bucket, takes action and pushes away the little monster that was on top of her. But what now? Because none of his attacks are working on the little monster, right? But wait, bro. So the system isn't trolling our protagonist, you guys. Holy shit, bro. So the little monsters are really resistant to physical sword attacks, bro? Our protagonist here is a monster, you know? So one of the little monsters pierces the leg of the mage, named Alicia, in a moment of desperation. She uses light magic. In an attempt to blind the little monster, it actually worked, but she didn't just blind the little monster, because in the process, her partner was also left half blind. He even tries to ask his friends, use a healing spell on them, but it was too late, because his friend had already kicked the bucket. And in complete desperation, they scream for help. And just as the little monster is about to finish them off, someone arrives and finishes off all of them with just one attack. Bro, this leaves the redhead a bit curious, right? Because the Taisios, which are the little monsters, right? They always protect their heads with their blade arms. Furthermore, the opening to pierce their necks is extremely small. However, this person, who you already know who it is, right, made this little monster lower its arms, right? Then he cut off their heads, and this technique can only be executed by a magic swordsman, who happens to be none other than Loud, you guys. Loud asks if they are from the Hunters Guild of Omphul. The redhead says yes. Loud asks if he knows him. The boy says yes, right, and that he heard that he came to hunt alone in the dungeon. A few months ago, to be exact, he stayed there for 70 days, you guys. But the truth is that he really didn't want to go to the dungeon, you know? He just ended up drinking too much. After that incident that happened, you guys, and after he woke up, he was inside the dungeon, furthermore, but he doesn't remember how or even why he entered the dungeon, you know? Otis heard that he was looking for a healing artifact, right? But obviously, that wasn't it, guys, right then. He sees that she got hurt. But she says they've already stopped the bleeding, right? However, since he is quite a simp, guys, he used an advanced healing potion on her leg. This potion he just used right there is extremely rare, you know, she asks. If Hayes doing this just because she's a girl, right? But he says that's not it, because this potion wouldn't be of any use for this kind of wound then. She says she will pay him back as soon as he gets out of there. Right. He says that continuing with a wound like that is stupid. So he decides to head back, right? She says, Hayes, turning back. After coming so far just because of her, something a true simp would say. But just as they were about to leave, Loud felt a slight pain in his stomach. Right, he suffers from irritable bowel syndrome. Poor guy. The guy just wants to get the hell out, you know. However, out of nowhere, the entire cave shakes. The redhead asks if it was an earthquake, but Ada says no. Since dungeons are part of another dimension, so Loud says for them to escape, right, using the side path, especially since he would never show weakness in front of a woman. Even if he dies, what a simp, man. Calm down, Loud. Everyone knows you just want to take a dump. Addis didn't want to leave. But the redhead picks her up in his arms and runs away. But the redhead wasn't supposed to run away, you know? He was supposed to stay there and help Loud, and let only the little mage leave, however. Since Hayes been there all this time, he must have leveled up, right? So he should be able to handle a few low-level bugs, right? But when he looks, a whole swarm of bugs was coming, man. And obviously, he runs for his life, right? But it was too late to run, however. The bugs just dashed past him, screaming, danger. Danger. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon pit, our protagonist was smashing the bugs. But even though Hayes making several bugs kick the bucket, he can't gain any XP, you know? And not to mention that he can't swing his sword properly, right? For fear of the cave collapsing, and also constantly adjusting his strength. In Berkman's party was really exhausting, he says, and on the other side of the wall, there are some bugs. Talking over there, you know, a magic sword is coming, you idiot. I was going to say run. But our protagonist comes in destroying everything, man. And as soon as he enters, he finds an artifact, guys. It's a fireball bracelet. That's awesome. But wasn't there supposed to be a boss protecting this artifact? No, man, because he already defeated the king of the bugs without even noticing, you know. However, nevertheless, if he takes this artifact from there, the monsters will disappear, you know. And if the monsters disappear, he'd won't be able to level up anymore, right? And so far, the only monsters he encountered were these bugs, you know? And not to mention that he still hasn't found the dungeon boss. And also, this artifact still seems to be the source of all the power. Right, guys, here? Guys, which would you choose? Cast a fireball, or shout fireball, or leave the artifact there, you know? Hand it. Overcasting a fireball is every man's dream, damn it. See? It was obvious that this was going to happen, right, guys? For him to be able to use the bracelet, he needs to be at a higher level, right? Level 30 own is required for him to use it, you know? So he asks himself if he should sell it, right? But wouldn't it be weird? Man, a level 5 selling an artifact, you know? There's no way around it, right, guys? Regardless of what our protagonist does, his level always ends up being a problem then out of nowhere. He hears a sound coming from the ground, And completely out of nowhere, a passage opens up right there, man. Could this be the boss's passage, guys? Let's find out right now. After waiting for a while, he finally reached the top floor of the dungeon. And since he needs to get back before the buff, Dwarf wakes up. It would be great if the boss showed up soon. He says there's nothing in the room. Near the dungeon core, he jokes around out of boredom, man, saying Hay's going to steal the core, and this and that. Well, if he takes the core, the whole dungeon will disappear, you know. Then out of nowhere, a tentacle grabs our protagonist's arm, so the boss finally appeared with tentacles. A level 45 observer. Finally, a high level monster, right, man? Will our protagonist manage to level up now, guys? Since that's the case, it's no time to play around, because his arms and legs are pinned down. But literally out of nowhere, Loud shows up there, man. Now things are troublesome for our protagonist, guys, because no one was supposed to find out he was there, you know? Especially since Hay's a level 5, right? A level 5 in a huge dungeon makes no sense, right, guys? But luckily for our protagonist, Loud starts losing his mind right there and keeps thinking the boss created an illusion based on his traumas. What do you mean, man? Good thing Hay's dumb, right, guys? You managed to see through my disguise. Then Loud charges at our protagonist. But while Loud was trying to attack our protagonist, the boss was trying to hit Loud, you know? But the protagonist saves him, and he dodges. Thinking our protagonist was attacking him, then he tries to hit our protagonist's balls. But our protagonist dodges by jumping upward, guys. That was close, man. And with just that dry strike, he almost kills the boss by accident, you know? But isn't this boss a bit too weak, man? But our protagonist forgot Hay's fighting Loud, and Loud almost hits our protagonist. However, he dodges easily, you know? He keeps attacking our protagonist. But our protagonist blocks Loud's attack with just his arms, you know? Loud says that because of our protagonist, he lost everything: his honor, his standing with the guild, and also his party, you know? My balls, you destroyed my balls. Damn. I'm not even kidding, man. He really said that, you know? And Hay's still thinking our protagonist has a thing with Addis, you know? The guy thinks Hay's a she, man. But they forgot that there's another guy in the room, right, guys? So the boss starts controlling Loud, and guys, rip Loud. The boss uses Loud to communicate with our protagonist, you know? He asks how our protagonist dares to toy with him, like a soccer ball, and blah, 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 that basic stuff. Right, guys? And after saying a bunch of things right there, he sends Loud charging at the protagonist with everything Hay's got. But our protagonist dodges everything, and with just one swing of his sword, he cuts the boss in half, guys. The boss is left wondering how he was defeated so easily with just a single swing of a sword. Just from the wind pressure, he says he needs to warn him before he takes the core. But before he can, our protagonist finishes him off, damn, guys. Who could this person be that the boss mentioned? Man, we don't know yet, but we'll find out soon. Our protagonist got a bit sad, guys, because he didn't get any XP. Right, so he decides to go back, since he didn't get anything. But then the system shows a notification to our protagonist about something. Right there, man, but it doesn't reveal what it is. A while later in the tent, the buff dwarf and the others were waking up. And UN asks the buff dwarf if he has seen Eric, which is our protagonist's fake name, you know? But nobody saw our protagonist when they woke up, and that makes her even more worried, thinking that our protagonist might have gone into the forest and kicked the bucket. But to reassure her, our protagonist appears behind her with that grumpy face of his. So she asks if something happened to him, but he says nothing happened. However, man, he still has that grumpy face of his. Then something happened, right, guys? But for us to find out, we have to go back a few minutes earlier in the dungeon. Because he defeated the boss of the tentacle, he gained 100,000 experience points, man. So guys, if the giant magic dogs gave 258 XP to him and he needs 1,100 to level up from level 4 to 5, doesn't that mean he needs 2,200 XP to level up to level 6 at least? That's what he thought. Because the actual amount he needs is 54 billion, guys. Holy crap, man. The system must owe our protagonist years. Bro, it's not possible, man. But if he needs all that XP, then... And that's when our protagonist had his first existential crisis. Guys, that's why he made that face. You know, so after all that, a week passes. And Berkman's party couldn't find any monsters outside the forest of satire. So, because of that, they return earlier than expected to the city of Omphel. However, there was something wrong. As soon as they arrive at the gate, the guard tells them to stop and asks for some kind of permit, and obviously, the old man doesn't have any permits, right guys? But this left the buff dwarf a bit confused, right? Because normally they just show their guild badge to be allowed through, you know? So the buff dwarf asks what happened, especially since they were away for 3 months, right? And it seems the guard knows the buff dwarf. You know, he says he heard that the hunters recalled all the adventurers back to the city 5 days ago. And the reason for all this is because the dungeon was closed, guys. And of course, after hearing that, they get a bit tense, right? But who could have closed the dungeon? Back there, man. Since our protagonist said he didn't take the core. Right, since he had a portal to get back, you know. But who could that person be, right guys? Our group asks the young mage who could have closed the portal. But obviously he doesn't know who it is, right? Because a hunter closing a dungeon is an incredible achievement. And only other worlders would hide that fact. But that's not the only problem. Because an inquisitor was sent by the church to execute the otherworlder. They would even take people to torture them. And all because they can't differentiate humans from another world. From the people of Latna, so they go after anyone who is above level 20. But aren't the buff dwarf and amber above level 20, guys? And from the looks of it, that's exactly why most of the hunters left the village, you know? This leaves our protagonist a bit down, right? Especially since he is a human from another world, right? So the buff dwarf decides to go to the guild because they need to sell the demonic stones, right? And get some cash. And also sell the materials from our protagonist's backpack. And with that, they're going to celebrate the first mission of our protagonists. So Berkman asks Amber to go with our protagonist to Bolton's shop, obviously, to sell the materials, right? But our protagonist says he knows where it is, so he decides to go alone, you know? Amber tried to stop him because he doesn't know the value of the goods. Right, but the buff dwarf holds her back and says our protagonist will figure it out. So there's no need to tell him because what Hay's carrying right now is something very valuable. Already at Bolton's shop, the buff dwarf's friend is there. Obviously, he doesn't agree to buy anything from our protagonist. Right, because of the current situation in the city. And because the buff dwarf is above level 20, Hay's a suspect. So, if he buys anything from our protagonist, or sells him anything, he would be getting involved in this, you know? Furthermore, the only reason this village was able to prosper was thanks to the dungeons, and without the dungeons, who would still stay in this city, especially with the Otherworlder and the Inquisitor on the loose, you know. So, because of that, why would he sell all this merchandise? But our protagonist is persistent, right? So, he keeps insisting, and obviously, the old man doesn't accept it, right, guys? But out of nowhere, the Inquisitor appears there, man. This leaves our protagonist a bit curious. Right, so this is the Inquisitor. However, our protagonist's biggest curiosity is to know what level these Inquisitors are, you know? He tells our protagonist that he has some good quality products, right? And guys, in the blink of an eye, he got close to our protagonist and asked if there's something wrong, man, guys, this crazy guy is at an immensely impossible level. Can our protagonist defeat this crazy guy? Man, so he asks if our protagonist can't see his level. But obviously our protagonist plays dumb. Right? Saying he doesn't know what Hei's talking about? Damn, guys. This crazy guy seems to be strong, okay? He says that. Wherever he goes, he is always bigger than everyone, but you are taller than me. However, our protagonist has heard this several times, right? So he keeps asking, why are you so surprised? To see me, then our protagonist says, who wouldn't be? He continues, since it's like that, why didn't you step back? And clearly, he says, because you would come after me. What is your religion? But our protagonist says he doesn't have any religion. He continues, which fairy tale do you like, however? Our protagonist is an orphan from a very distant village, so he doesn't know any, and obviously, this makes the Inquisitor a bit curious. An orphan from a very distant village with no religion. And at the same time, a hunter? Isn't that strange? Otherworlder? And he says, but of course, our protagonist keeps playing dumb. Right, especially since it hasn't been long. Since he became a hunter, and he even called him an otherworlder. You are talking about the wrong person, buddy. So, since it's like that, your level should be low. But you are level 5, he asks. Now, can he sell his items since he was investigated? Right, this leaves the old man impressed, you know? But even so, he says he can't buy those things from our protagonist because he has no one to sell them to, right? It's obvious that this conversation with the Inquisitor damn well left our protagonist terrified, right? And out of nowhere, the old man drops the bracelet that our protagonist got in the dungeon. Man, before our protagonist's ass was so tight, not even a Wi-Fi signal could get through, you know? Now, absolutely nothing can. Because whenever this artifact shows up, our protagonist is screwed, right, guys? But the damn old man drops the artifact. Where does the artifact go? Man, right at the Inquisitor's feet, you know? And of course, after seeing this, he asks how a level 5 obtained an artifact. But luckily for our protagonist, he says that a level 5 wouldn't have one, right? This is a valuable artifact. So keep it safe, man. He is so scared, guy. But since you said you're a novice hunter, I'll tell you a story that will serve as a lesson. 15 years ago, a couple lived in a small village. The husband was a veteran hunter. He wasn't the leader of his group, but he had the power to draw people in, one ordinary day he and his group took on a quest. However, he froze in fear in front of a monster. That seemed to be harmless. His companions didn't know why the strongest in the group acted that way. When the group forced him to talk, well, the man said that monster's level is 800. His companions didn't believe him, but he was telling the truth. He was an otherworlder who could see everyone's level. However, the monster found out where they were, and the man was left alone to fight the monster, while buying time for his companions to escape. So he has a simple question for our protagonist. Who exactly died in this story? Our protagonist says the Earthling, because he revealed his identity. But he was wrong. The leader of the group was a certain someone who told the truth to the Inquisitor. As for the other members of the group, they were killed under suspicion of siding with the Earthling, and the Earthling miraculously survived and returned home. However, the villagers who heard about the rumors and were influenced by them burned down his house, and there was no one left to welcome him back. After that, he massacred the villagers and fled, and everyone who was involved with the Earthling they are killed, but you are a level 5. What sin could you have committed, our protagonist asks. Why he is telling this story. To him? Right. He says that he received an artifact from an Earthling, and it being used by an inexperienced hunter is something common. I will give you all the immunity possible. So, he asks which group our protagonist belongs to, and obviously after hearing this, Our protagonist is going to be pissed off at the Inquisitor, and so he tries to throw a huge punch at him, but before things went south, right guys? Addis arrives and stops our protagonist. He says that the Inquisitor seems to have misunderstood one thing. Haha. Our protagonist says that it was dangerous. Then she gets pissed off at our protagonist, saying a bunch of things to him, right there, saying that he can't even handle a simple task, and blah, 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 blah. And guys, it's obvious that she is acting, right? The Inquisitor asks who she is. So, she goes all pompous to introduce herself. Her name is Addis Bannister. She is the 37th leader of the Bannister family. In short, the famous dragon hunter family. She says that he is inexperienced, but she is doing what she can to restore her family. I'm completely confused, guys. Not knowing if this pest is a she or a he, the Inquisitor asks what her relationship is with our protagonist, and obviously she makes up an excuse, right? She says that our protagonist is a pawn that she hired a few days ago. And also, it hasn't been long since he arrived here, so he still doesn't have much of a clue about things. She's saying this while giving a thumbs up to our protagonist. She continues, saying that she told our protagonist to bring the artifact to help with the research, but things ended up like this, so she tells our protagonist that now he has to dance to the tune, I'm sorry? Master, what is this man? A JoJo reference right here, Addis. Says that he is busy with the research. So he takes off, right? May the darkness protect you. He says the same thing, may the darkness protect you. I have absolutely no idea what that means, guys. And of course, after Addis saves our protagonist, he thanks him, right? But the fact that he has an artifact, isn't that suspicious to you? He says, however. She says that he didn't say anything about what he saw in the forest, nor did he ask anything, but what if he is a dangerous guy? He or she? I don't know, man. I don't even know this thing's gender anymore. He says the same thing. What if he is a dangerous guy? But out of curiosity, the Inquisitor asks what the artifact's ability was. It shoots fire, and it was. At that exact moment that they made a mistake, it was obvious that this was going to happen, right guys? Sorry, but I couldn't resist. A few days before, on our protagonist's first day in Berkman's group, he was a bit annoyed because none of the monsters he was defeating were giving him XP, and so he went looking for many, many monsters. He wonders why he only finds weak monsters. So he says that the Hellhounds were better, because with the Hellhounds, he could level up. Right, he needs to level up. But while he was lost in his thoughts, the jacked dwarf calls out to him, saying that there is nothing to fear. He says that because it's the first time that our protagonist has a group, so he hands some slop over to our protagonist to celebrate his entry into Berkman's group, but he doesn't guarantee the taste will be that good. Right, this makes Amber pissed off. Right, and the crazy thing is it fell to our protagonist's plate. Anyway, she says the buff dwarf might accept him, but she still hasn't. No. We don't need a boy who just complains about the taste of the food, so eat up, she says. And the little mage is behind our protagonist's hand. He keeps wondering if they did something to the food, right? But it couldn't be worse than hellhound meat, right? Or could it? But thinking about it, it's been a long time since he ate anything besides hellhound meat. For me, it's been ages since he used a spoon, This is the feeling of not being alone. How cute, man. Now, back to what matters, guys. The Inquisitor trapped them in wind magic. Our protagonist asks if this is wind magic, but Addis says Hayes not feeling a mana flow because these winds Hayes making are healing winds. So, that means Hayes a high-level priest. I've gone hoarse, guys. Defeating this guy still won't be easy. No. And if our protagonist tries to fight seriously, his identity will be revealed. Right, the Inquisitor says they don't need to worry, because nothing bad will happen if they stay inside. So that's why he would prefer for them to accompany him in silence. It seems there's no other way out, guys. He asks if Hay's looking for the person who completed the dungeon. If you find him, you'll leave the rest of the people alone. Want you, of course. We are busy people, however. Just as our protagonist was about to speak, who shows up there? Guys, none. Other than loud one-ball guys, and guess. Who completed the dungeon, quote unquote. Right after the boss possessed Loud, and our protagonist took him down right after that. Loud wakes up, and he thinks that it was at that moment that he defeated the boss, so yes. He took the core in the dungeon, right? But soon, after the dungeon vanished, he almost starved to death on the iPhone plains. So that's when the redhead and Alicia found him and helped him, He thinks Hay's going to become a legend, this and that, but no. Hay's being arrested here, because since he was the one who completed the dungeon, quote unquote, right, guys? He became the main suspect. Everyone thought the guy had kicked the bucket, Who would have thought it was him who completed the dungeon? She says, well, after all that, the Inquisitor apologizes, right, because he almost took the wrong people. Addis asks what will happen to Loud. He says he can't reveal the location, but obviously he will be investigated, right? They need to check his testimony and give a verdict. If they don't see any problem, he'll be released, Just like that, man. But thanks to Loud. Our protagonist didn't kick the bucket, right, guys? Because of the Inquisitor, our protagonist couldn't sell anything. Right, the Inquisitor says he doesn't have money on him, but a check would solve things. Right, he says it would be hard for our protagonist to cash it, so he put it in Otis's name. Now he just needs our protagonist's signature. He finds it a bit suspicious, right? Because his mom taught him not to sign anything carelessly. See that, guys? Listen to your moms, okay? Obviously. Since it's a lot of money, he wasn't going to refuse, right? He asks if this isn't a recruitment form, but of course not. Right, because they wouldn't stoop to that kind of thing. But he couldn't say the same thing about the Order of Light. Oh boy, you guys. Is our protagonist going to smash? Everyone will see. And after our protagonist signs it, he beats it then. Our protagonist asks if Addis could do him a favor. Sometime later at the Hunters Guild, the receptionist was apologizing to the bad dwarf, right, because the entire guild ran away. But he says it's not her fault. Since everyone ran away like crazy, there was nothing she could do. Right, however, the most important thing is that she is still there, protecting the guild, Then Ewan asks if Amber managed to sell the magic stones. She said that only 5 gold coins were left, but that's not what she got from the magic stones, but rather what was left of the guild's reserves. And of course, that leaves Amber pissed off, right, you guys? Because the guild master ran away with all the money. So, that's why he didn't call them, Because he knew they wouldn't just stand there watching him do that, right? She gets pissed at the dwarf because Hay's drinking in a situation like this, the guys have their lives ruined. No job, no money, and the guy is simply drinking, bro. So, he sits next to Amber and asks if she remembers 9 years ago. She said yes, right, because she probably saved him several times. He proclaimed that he would take care of this rural village, back when dungeons or a guild didn't even exist. It doesn't matter if it's a guild, his heart hasn't changed. She says that since the day she met him, precisely because he is like that. That's why she's still single. Oh boy, you guys, she gets all blushed after thinking about what she said. And just when the dwarf is about to confess to Amber, the little mage interrupts. Bro, that leaves Amber pissed off, bro. She even cuts the meat with her hand, bro. What do you mean, she tells them to talk after the party. You guys, Amber is on the offensive. Bro, look, while they were celebrating, someone arrives there. Who I think is the protagonist? Right. And judging by the bad dwarf's face, it must be right. But it was only Adis, carrying our protagonist's backpack. Almost dying, you know. What the hell is this? After resting and drinking some water, the bad dwarf asks why he has Eric's backpack. So, he asks, what happened to him, right? He says he doesn't know. Because our protagonist asked him to do this, Amber tells them to take a look. Because the backpack is full of money. So, he managed to sell everything. But this is way above the market price. He says, Addis says, that he asked to hand in his guild badge. The dwarf asks if he said why he was leaving. Addis says he doesn't know, but he had a scared expression on his face. But why on earth did our protagonist leave the guild? Just like that out of nowhere for us to find out. That we have to go back a few hours ago. When our protagonist was signing the contract with the Inquisitor asks if he knows what that was. And obviously he knows, right, you guys? It's called the Great Earth. But hadn't they been annihilated by the four heroes years ago? Why am I going crazy, bro? And obviously he says he doesn't know what it is, right? Well, it's true that a level 5 wouldn't know. And what is that? Besides, nothing good comes from you knowing what this is. But if a level 5 like you, even if it's impossible, were from another world and recognize this item, then I would like you to recall the story that I told you. And that was why our protagonist left the guild to protect his companions. While he was walking on the street, in a moment of anger, he broke a box that was there. But that box belonged to some guys who were there smoking a cigarette, you know, back at the guild. The little mage and the others were angry because they didn't know the reason why our protagonists had given up. Just like that, right? They could have convinced him to stay, the little mage says. But the jacked dwarf tells them to stop because their job makes them put their lives at risk. And besides, that they shouldn't pressure other people to do the same. And Amber back there wishes our protagonist well, you know? Then Otis leaves, right? Because he has nothing else to do there. Going back to our protagonist, he was waking up, and one of the guys there says Hayes never seen him around there, but from his sword, he deduces that our protagonist is a hunter. He got it right. You got it right, you clever bastard. And obviously our protagonist is there because he broke the arm in the leg of those cigarette smokers over there, you know, and besides that, he broke their things, right? And according to the cigarette smokers, he slept in their territory. Do you remember? That box that our protagonist broke over there. So, because of that, they tried to beat him up, but that's when they broke their own arms and legs, you know? And since he didn't have anywhere else to sleep, he stayed in an abandoned house that he found, in short, in their territory, right? They keep wondering how someone can have a body so hard. Pause. They think Hayes using magic, right? But it's nothing like that. If you don't believe me, why don't you try to hit me? Otherwise, it means you're a coward. Just like those pieces of shit behind you said. That's right. No, wait, we never said that, man. They're fucking lying. And of course, the bald guy gets pissed and tries to hit our protagonist, however. Damn, man, the guy is weaker than the little cockroach, man. What do you mean? But now, what does our protagonist do? Especially since there are several of them? Even so, it would be easy for our protagonist to get out of there, right? But nothing good will come of it. If our protagonist keeps causing trouble around, right, while all this was happening, an old man arrived there saying he thought it was a monster since it's making a fucking lot of noise. Mr. President, it's dangerous, man. Shut up. Hayes just a dog. And of course, this makes our protagonist pissed off, man. Because he hates dogs, I bet they hate me. Too, you know why? But out of nowhere, the old man talks about our protagonist's fierce temperament. So you must be from the Rocky Mountains, right? Oh boy, guys. How does Grandpa know, man? He tells them to let him go, but our protagonist breaks free with the utmost ease, you know? He asks who the old man is and how he knows the Rocky Mountains. If you want to know, how about working for me? In the last video, our protagonist ended up accepting to work for the old man. They're right to find out how he knows about the Rocky Mountains, then right. After that, 6 months pass in a certain place. Near the wall, there were some guys. They're removing the furniture from a lady's house. He tells his henchmen to remove everything from the house and to make sure to leave nothing inside the lady. Even asks right there, right, why they are doing this to them, but the bald guy says it seems her husband didn't say anything to her because they told him they would take care of everything today. However, before anything could happen, her husband arrives there completely furious, man, almost slashing the guy. I dare you guys to touch my family. Don't do that, buddy. And since the buckethead is causing trouble, the bald guy orders them to bring the hammer. That's it. Buckethead got terrified too, right? Because, man, look at the size of our protagonist. Holding the hammer, man. Who wouldn't be shitting their pants, right, guys? But the buckethead is brave, saying that the guild might be over, but I'm still a hunter, and I can finish you off. He even tries to stab his sword into our protagonist. But since our protagonist's body is strong, right, the sword, don't even come in, bro. Get out of my face right now. And that leaves the buckethead petrified, right? Meanwhile, Eric readies his axe. And with just one swing, he destroys the entire house, son. Oh no, bro, the guy is a monster. But a while later, they deliver a new house to them because they only destroyed their old house to build new houses for the new residents. I think it probably would have been better to say that before, right? But okay. And of course, after all that, the buckethead apologizes, right? Saying that he had drunk a little bit. Before this and that, no, precisely not, brother. But he says he wants to apologize, specifically to Eric, right? Because the only reason he didn't thrust his sword into Eric was because Eric's body is strong. And man, this business about thrusting a sword is a bit weird, right? But Eric asks the guy, Kevik, if there's no way that's his name, bro. Holy shit. His name, man, is Kevik. Seriously, man, how crazy. He asks if they're already finished. But the buckethead insists, right? Saying that he should stay at least for dinner. This and that, but no. He is going to go back and make his report. You can't control yourself after all. This man is being sincere, Dant. Mind him, Hayes just one of the weirdos. Of course, our protagonist is going to get completely pissed off, right? What? What is weird about me and you guys? Clearly, he was left traumatized by that last talk with the Inquisitor, right? And because of that, Hayes having hallucinations. Hey there, pal. No one in this world is rude. There's no need to force it and stay. Haha, Hayes, a weird big brother. You're a person from another world. A weird big brother, our protagonist. Starts thinking the boy thinks Hayes a weirdo, right? So, he tries to grab his weapon and finish the boy off. But he regains his senses and leaves. The buckethead is left, thinking that our protagonist got really angry with him, right? But the bald guy says he doesn't know what happened, right? But Hayes not angry. With you, that man has been working for the association for half a year, and from the looks of it, our protagonist gets paid 66 coins, you guys, which is more than a mid-level hunter gets paid, you know, but that's because Eric can do a month's worth of work in just one day, and because of that, he became famous among the others in the association of builders. But no one ever tried to talk to him, right? Probably out of fear, right, bro? So he arrives all worked up at the old man's office, asking what that was all about, since houses like those don't exist in that world. However, that was exactly why the old man sent him there, right? Meanwhile, he tells the old man to stop playing games with him, right? Because he did everything the old man told him to do for 5 months. After what he said about the Rocky Mountains, the old man says that everyone lived as normal humans. 40 years ago, us and you people from another world. Wow, you guys, So the old man knows everything, bro? Then, why didn't he report our protagonist? Bro, he keeps saying that. He couldn't even eat. He couldn't even sleep at night. He couldn't even talk to anyone. Do you know why? He asks. Because I'm from another world? But no, the old man says, it's not that actually. It's because you can't live with other normal people. Since people have only seen humans from another world, working as hunters, it's been more than 40 years since the first Earthling appeared. He says, but if you don't fight and live a peaceful life, no one will think anything of you, boy. If you want to live a normal life, don't get involved with hunters. After finishing this task, then, the old man hands a hunter request to our protagonist. And of course, he would refuse it, right, you guys? Until someone knocks on the door, and the old man says that this request was sent specifically for him then. The old man tells this person to come in, and guys, this person is none other than Otis Man. How are you, Eric? He asks. Then he asks the old man, how did this guy find him, man, especially since he walked around the whole time with his face covered, right? But it's not like a little cloth made him invisible, right, man? However, the old man only accepted Otis's request because he wouldn't stop pestering him. But Hay's going to make sure to send him away. So, Otis introduces himself. They're right, saying it's good to finally meet the old man. My name is Otis from the Amphil Hunters Guild, the old man says. That his boy used to be a hunter, but now he works at the construction company, meaning he has become a member of our family. And then you come here saying, for me to give him up? Do you think we're a bunch of weaklings? It was more or less like that he spoke. But Otis says that this isn't a guild request, but a personal one. So, the old man asks what his relationship is with Eric. Otis says they were in different parties, and that's why they weren't very close. But even so, he protected him when he was discovered by his group. Ah, but what's the problem with that? The old man asks. He said the problem is that they were naked at the time. And after that he can't say. Anything else? Look at the old man, you damn pervert. He even tries to explain himself. There, right? Saying it didn't happen. That way, and this and that. But Otis continues, saying he was in an extremely difficult situation when he returned to the city. Then, he had a check for 1 million X delivered to the guild. So, old man, I think you should get up. And boom, he threw our proto through the window, man. You damn jerk. Be a man. Take your responsibility, Daunt. Come back here without finishing this job. Hay's pissed off with the attitude. Right. You didn't explain it properly. He sits all sad in the corner, saying it's been a long time since he stopped being a hunter. But Otis tells him not to worry, because the mission is just to explore and collect samples in the Satire Forest. And because of that, they won't face any kind of danger. But if anything happens, it'll protect you, he promises. Seriously, man. Now, I'm even more curious. What is Otis's gender? Man, is it a boy or a girl? A while later, in the Satire Forest, we were walking peacefully through the forest. But our protagonist was a bit reflective. Right, because there were so many people to choose from. Why did it have to be him? Did he notice something last time? But it's like the old man said, right? If he acts naturally, no one will suspect anything, right? But while they were walking, there, our proto finds a level. To monster, how cute, man. Our proto was even thinking about taking the little monster, right? But out of nowhere, bam, Otis made the little monster. Kick the bucket, poor thing, man. He gets all worried about our protagonist. This and that. Man, I'm thinking Otis has a soft spot, guys. So they continued the exploration. Right, but every little creature that appeared, Otis made it kick the bucket, man. Poor little creatures. The guy burned the entire forest down, seriously, just to kill the little monsters. Man, just so they wouldn't hurt our proto. Man, poor little creatures, man. What deforestation. He doesn't even have the nerve to ask. If our proto is hurt, man, Our proto isn't hurt at all. But the little creatures kicked the bucket, man. I'm sad now, guys. Poor little creatures, man. Our proto says that from now on, Hei's banned from using fire magic. Man, the guy killed the whole forest, you know? But Addis tells our proto not to worry about the forest because the fire goes out. As soon as he interrupts his magic, a while later, when they were cutting wood, our proto asks if Addis was part of another group, but he says no. Because the first group he joined was the group alongside Loud Guys. Addis says it was a bit strange to be with Loud, right? And because of that, he ended up acting alone, and also, he didn't have that much experience working in a group, right? So our protagonist asks why he joined the Hunters Guild. Then he answers that he thought it would be fun to collect materials on his own, rich people, and mages can simply level up by doing magic research so they don't need to go out into the open field. But how would a dragon hunter hunt at home, our protagonist says? He says it was just for registration. Right. Besides, dragons haven't been able to reproduce, so it's extremely difficult to find one nowadays. Our protagonist is like, what do you mean there are no more? Dragons. Addis says Hei's not sure, but why are you so interested in them, Eric? Our protagonist says that maybe he can level up if he finds a dragon, right? Because where he came from, dragons don't exist, so they are rare monsters. And that's why it's hard to see them, man. This made Addis a bit sad, man. I'm almost sure Addis is a dragon, man. I'm 95% sure Hei's a dragon. Monsters? Huh. Dragons should definitely be feared. Addis says that dragons fly through the skies with giant wings. But that's not why you should be afraid. Because if dragons want to, they can destroy the entire planet, guys. Because dragons possess a vast amount of mana. To be more exact, guys, dragons possess unlimited mana, man. But that's not why people are afraid of them. The real reason people fear dragons is because they can increase their level by defeating their enemies, man, but that's also broken. Right, guys? The thing is totally broken, man. But if you guys think it stops there, you're wrong, man. Besides, having infinite mana, they are very intelligent and can communicate verbally with anyone. They might be surviving in secret and living a lonely life, Addis says. Our protagonist says that it doesn't matter. No matter how lonely it is, living in safety can be much better, a wyvern that he knows could also communicate. But she prefers to live in secret. And of course, Addis bursts out laughing, right, man? A wyvern? What are you talking about, man? And literally, out of nowhere, Addis asks if he hasn't thought about becoming a hunter again. It's not that he hasn't thought about it, but how on earth? Could he go back to the buff dwarf after all this? But no, that's not what Addis is saying. He actually is thinking about forming his own group. And of course, guys, this makes our protagonist curious, right? Because he asks, what are you going to do? If I run away again, do you think I'm an idiot? There's no guarantee that you won't. Betray me first, and the same goes for me betraying you. But that makes no difference. To you, right, am just a level 5 hunter. Fortunately, we are deep in a forest. Eric, I'm sorry. Whoa, guys. Is Addis going to turn on our protagonist? Well, I don't know. Well, see then. Addis takes his wand, and bam, he hits dead in the monster that was bothering our protagonist. Damn, did you guys really think our mage would turn against our protagonist? Damn, I mean, not our mage, right, man? Your mage there, right, guys? So guys, what? Were you saying man? And of course, this leaves our protagonist a bit curious, right? Why did he use an attack like that, man? He made a projectile of mana pass through the monster's throat, thus causing its lungs to catch fire. He did this to prevent the monster from calling for help from those ugly monsters over there, right? And this leaves Eric impressed, right, man? Also, the guy is crazy. To think of all that in such a short amount of time, man, But this leaves our protagonist a bit curious, right guys? Because these monsters don't make sense. They're right. Because the monsters in this forest don't usually approach humans, and that's the reason why they don't get subjugation missions. But as incredible as it seems, today several monsters came right toward them. So Addis asks our protagonist to open the monster's stomach. And now that our protagonist stopped to look, right guys? This monster here is a level 20 kobold, and a monster that can only be found in the dungeon. But if this monster is from the dungeon, then what are they doing? They're guys, because it didn't loud. Close the dungeon there, so how are they? There, man, but Addis gets pissed off at our protagonist, saying that the mana stones aren't the problem. Open its stomach. Now, a while later, our protagonists and Addis were in a certain village, over there, which looked like the kobold's base. And from the looks of it, guys, the monsters started eating the humans, after devouring everything they could around them. Then, our protagonist asks if there's a new dungeon nearby. But Addis says no, because Amphil would know instantly. Due to the changes in the terrain, when a dungeon appears, wait, guys, then why are there so many more dungeons? But while they were talking, Addis spotted a possible survivor. And of course, after seeing that, Addis wasn't going to just stand there, right? So he tries to rescue the guy. But our protagonist doesn't let him go, because the guy might already be dead. But Addis doesn't care about that, man. He fires a mini arrow into the monster's mouth, which at first did nothing. But right after, bam, a giant explosion happens. Man, Eric keeps saying that the guy might be dead. But Addis says you're right, he might be dead. But he could also be alive, damn it, however. This makes our protagonist curious. Like, what is that thing you shot? And why did it explode, Addis? Says it's a device that fires magic stones that have magic spells recorded on them. Ah, now I get it then. He tells Eric to hide while he takes care of these monsters. But it won't do any good for him to defeat these monsters, because the man has already passed away. Meanwhile, Addis set fire to the entire village, man. And judging by the state of the village, guys, which doesn't exist anymore, right? It seems these monsters, guys, the kobolds occupied this village for about a year and a half, not occupied. Right, man, they stole this piece of crap, right? And in Addis's head, that person might be the only survivor. But while Addis was running, one of the kobolds threw a rock at him. Whoa. What the hell? Is this, you could say they were intelligent, but he had no idea they could hide and would use throwing weapons. And man, it's just a rock. But Addis wipes them all out, man. Because a tactic like that wouldn't work on a fire mage. However, one of the monsters manages to escape, guys. And Addis's wand breaks. It looks like he used it too much. So, the monster grabs the spear that was there and charges at him with everything, however. Addis shoots one of those mini arrows into the monster's mouth and throws the wand at its head. Oh boy. Meanwhile, he pulls another wand from his coat and bam, a giant explosion is caused, sending the monster to the afterlife. But sometime later, Addis was a bit sad, right guys? Because as you already know, the guy had already passed away. And from the looks of it, guys, he froze to death. But our protagonist says that he lived there for so long and never felt cold. But you're you, damn it, however. Addis says that's not it. This man, he was also a level 27 hunter from the Hunters Guild of Amphil. But wait, him too. What do you mean? Him too, he says. That there were several badges scattered amidst the destruction outside the village. But that's a bit strange, right, you guys? Because if so many hunters had disappeared like that, the guild would have noticed, right? So this means they disappeared gradually. And in a place where people wouldn't know if the hunters appeared gradually or not. And the only place that hunters always go, you guys, would be the dungeon. But the dungeon on the iPhone planes, wasn't it closed by Loud, the on a testicle guy? 6 months ago, you guys, how would you transport people from the iPhone planes to their Addis? The dungeon is located between the village and Omphel. So traveling to the city, that would be the distance. Addis, that wouldn't be possible without this. But what would this be, you guys? None. Other than a motherfucking portal, bro? Then our protagonist asks, if the kobolds can use this kind of magic, right? But Addis says no. Right, bro? That's impossible. And what about the Taishos? Addis tells him to stop joking around, right? Because a portal, at short range, can only be generated by a mage of level 40, who has experience with space transition magic. But from here to the iPhone planes, you would need at least a level 60, you guys. No, maybe even higher, Ada says. This is scary. But what would we do? If this individual who created the portal were an enemy, well, of course we. When Addis turns around, you guys, a fucking lich appears there, you guys. And it looks like things just got bad for them, right, you guys? Because this lich right there is level 72, son. And since he has no eyes, right, he uses mana traces to be able to identify his opponent. At one point he asks, what is wrong with him? Addis says that he must have lost all his senses when he became an undead. And because of that, he became able to sense mana around him. In other words, you guys, he can only sense Otis's presence, but he can't sense our protagonist's presence. Addis was even going to try to tell our protagonist to run away, right? But out of nowhere, the lich hits our protagonist right in the face with an ice projectile. Bro, wait, didn't he only see Addis? With the mana traces, bro, then. How did he manage to see our protagonist, you guys? Yes, exactly what you are thinking. Bro, the lich, who didn't have eyes before, now has them. Addis gets all worried about our protagonist, right? But the projectile didn't hit our protagonist. It hit his shield, you know? Eric tells Addis to focus on the lich because they won't get out of this easily. And after our protagonist takes this attack, you guys, he is sure that Addis cannot defeat this lich at his current level. But how did the lich get those eyes? You guys, I don't know. That's what we're going to find out now. What is a couple? Was what the lich asked one of his coworkers. And the coworker said that couples walk the same path, looking in the same direction. The lich was very impressed by what he said. So yes, you guys, he finished them both off at once, just to take their eyes, bro. How bizarre, man. But while the lich was going crazy, their Addis threw a fireball at him, but he easily defends it. Right, you guys? Give up already with this weak magic. You won't be able to defeat me, Eric. Asks where Hay's aiming. But Addis says it's not his fault, because the lich is reflecting his magic with his own. You won't be able to land a single flame on me with that weak magic of yours. Then Addis fires one of those mini flashes at the lich and tells our protagonist to run. I already said it's useless. This left Eric a bit confused. Right. Why did it work this time? But he says it's because physical attacks don't. Works against him. The lich thought he didn't need to block magic stones, since they aren't magic, and that's when he bit the dust. Oh, or maybe not. Eric asked if Hay's feeling afraid. No. It's not quite that. It's more like a premonition. So he grabbed Addis. Right there, and out of nowhere, boom, the ultimate defense. The lich trapped them in a giant ice dome. This leaves Eric impressed, right? It's snowing inside the ice prison. Man, what do you mean? Addis thanks Eric for saving his life. But this is no time to be impressed, Eric. Because if they stay there, they will end up just like those hunters who bit the dust, frozen solid. Because the lich, inside this ice dome, he becomes basically invincible, guys. This leaves our protagonist worried, right? Asking Addis, what happened? Addis says that the lich reduced the temperature of the mana, so he can't do anything. Okay, But what does that mean? The Lich says it means that burned mana to create fire magic and frozen mana to create ice are compatible and will always be in conflict. And since Addis is a specialist in fire magic, right guys, it's obvious that his magic would freeze the little lesson from Professor Remendo ends here. And he was mocking them, guys. He really said that, man. Now let's get to the experiments, diamond dust. Oh no, man. The guy used diamond dust on them. Man. What do you mean, man? Because he says the air is cold, but he can take it. But I think, will he really be able to take it for long? Look. And he asks what it's like to have your lungs frozen. He even says, man, that he doesn't know what that's like, right? Since he doesn't have lungs. They say it's very painful. When the mana circulating through your body freezes. And now, guys, what are they going to do? I don't know. But Eric says that he can fight like this with the art of deception because he wants to see him fighting, since that's the only way for him to live a normal life. Because if Addis finds out Hayes from another world, he will have to distance himself from Addis. But he doesn't want Addis to bite the dust. Right there, guys. Look, Addis apologizes to the protagonist, saying that he was very selfish. So he takes one of his wands and stabs it into his heart, burning his internal mana, and finally stopping the freezing process in his body. However, this won't last for long, right guys? This makes our protagonist worried. But Addis tells him to listen carefully, because this is his last chance, no matter what happens. Escape. As soon as a hole appears in the wall. And of course our protagonist gets annoyed with him, right? What are you talking about? Do you really think that you can defeat him alone? Our protagonist says. But Addis screams out, promise me. And our protagonist has no choice, right guys? Except to say he promises, thank you, Eric, then. He charges at the Lich with everything Hayes got. Addis throws 3 wands up, which causes a giant explosion. But nothing happened to the Lich. So Addis uses this opportunity to hide in the smoke, however. Right, guys? You remember that this ugly guy doesn't even need his eyes to find Addis, right? Because he has a skill called magic perception, with which he can find the person using magic. However, guys, when Addis caused that explosion, several traces of mana were scattered through the air. And because of that, he can't find Addis. But he doesn't need to find ATS. Let Addis find him, guys. Now everything makes sense, guys. The sound our protagonist heard in the forest. And the reason why Addis was there when our protagonist followed the sound is because he was a dragon. Oh boy, guys. I knew it, man. I told you. You guys doubted me at the bar. Man, he says he can't explain right now. But he tells our team to trust him. Even the Lich was like, in glitches out, you guys. Unbelievable. A dragon, bro. What do you mean a dragon here? The Lich says that Addis is a young dragon. At least 100 years young. Where the hell? The guy's elderly, bro. And that's why Addis can use fire magic. Without chanting, right, you guys? They say that fire dragons can breathe flames as soon as they learn to fly, but Addis tells him not to keep assuming things, based just on rumors and on that. He's right. He doesn't know much about dragons. But how about I learn right now? So, he casts Diamond Pot at Addis, but it's not like Addis would lose to just one spell, right? And when Egghead least expected it, he gets a fireball right in the face. Addis might be a young dragon, but he is still a dragon. Since Hayes in his dragon form, now his firepower is going to be much greater. And now, Bonehead. What are you going to do, huh? Freezing him doesn't work anymore, however. Bonehead won't just let it slide, right, you guys? In this left-hand bin. Impressed, right? Because this infernal heat that Addis is causing is turning the ice and snow into water. But even so, at Addis's current level, he can't defeat the Lich, you guys. Addis even tries to launch a flamethrower at the wall to try and destroy it, right? But as the Lich himself said, that place is filled with ice mana. Therefore, it doesn't matter how hard Addis tries, because piercing this wall will be impossible. But while the Lich was saying this, he noticed something, that Addis is trying to protect our protagonist. So, he launched an ice spell. At our protagonist, however, Addis defends and protects him. Our protagonist says that he can take care of himself. But how is he going to take care of himself? Hayes only a level 5, right, you guys? But he doesn't have time for this, because Bonehead starts shooting multiple ice projectiles right at the dragon's face, and he could easily stop these ice attacks. Right, but since Hayes protecting our protagonist, he isn't able to do it. Who would imagine a dragon would protect a human? The Lich says this, leaving Bonehead very intrigued. Right, because a dragon protecting a human is an unusual thing. Did they brainstorm and brainwash you by any chance, however? Addis doesn't give a damn about him, right, you guys? Because while all this was happening, Addis was coming up with a plan to try and make our protagonist escape, right? Because in Addis's head, our protagonist is weak. You got weak, right, you guys? Bonehead even tried to irritate Addis, right? Asking if our protagonist is a little snack for him. Looks like it worked, right, you guys? Addis got completely pissed off, son, sending multiple fire attacks at the Lich, but he easily dodges son. Bonehead tries to fight back, but Addis stops him with a fireball. However, the Lich is stronger, you guys. You pathetic fools. You should worship us. And bam, Addis takes a heavy punch from the Lich, son. Egghead is left completely baffled. Right? A dragon throwing a punch? Bro, not bad, right, you guys? But it's a pity, because his level is still too low to manage to defeat Bonehead, because the moment he punched the Lich, his leg was pierced, and clearly our protagonist gets sad, right? Because Hayes not doing anything to help Addis. Out of fear that hell find out Hayes an otherworlder, then Addis asks if he will keep his promise. And our protagonist gets a bit confused, right, Addis? Why do you? And bam, the wall behind our protagonist breaks, and Bonehead is like, what do you mean he exploded the wall from the inside out? And since he managed to open the path then, he tells our protagonist to escape, but obviously, our protagonist wouldn't leave him there, but Addis says he needs to stop the Lich. Did you forget? Our promise? Go. And there's no way around it, right, you guys? Our protagonist has no choice. I don't know, but a long-range ice magic. Blade Blizzard. And without me even noticing, in the blink of an eye, several blades of ice were already heading in his direction. However, when everything went wrong was when I thought I could block it. Or was it when I didn't? Tell him that the man hanging next to the well was dead. Maybe it was when I didn't stop him. Even knowing the elite's level, this only happened because I wanted to live a normal level 5 life. And because of my fault, all of this happened. Guys, I don't know why our protagonist is so afraid of Addis finding out Hayes from another world. Because damn it, man, Hayes, a dragon, dude. It's a being that's almost impossible to find in this world. You know, I'm understanding now, guys. Addis is from a family of dragon slayers, and Hayes a dragon. Man, go figure. And of course, after Adius gets hit by several projectiles, our protagonist gets a bit worried about him. Right, but Addis says Hayes glad our protagonist is safe. And of course, Eric gets worried about Addis. Right? Because Hayes losing a lot of blood, however, Addis tells him not to worry, because dragons have sturdy bodies. And clearly Hayes acting tough, right guys? Because Hayes losing a lot of blood and won't hold out for much longer. Will he really manage to stay alive? Until our protagonist's fight is over, but Hanbin is still afraid of Adius finding out Hayes from another world, right guys? So Hayes thinking about waiting for Adis to pass out so he can fight. But how is Adis going to handle taking a hit like that, right guys? However, guys, even if our protagonist waited for Addis to pass out and fought against the Lich, after that, he wouldn't be able to heal Addis's large body with the few potions he has. But while Eric was lost in his thoughts, Addis told him not to make that face, because he owes him an apology. If only I were stronger than this, I know. I had promised you, Eric. I'm sorry. Of course, this text moves our protagonist. Right, guys? He did that just because of a promise, man. And not only was Eric intrigued, the boneheaded guy was, too, saying that. By the looks of it, the young dragon took a liking to this human, the boneheaded guy. Asks him, do you really think it's the duty of the strong to protect the weak? Do you really think that's an honorable thing, however? That's not how Manhwa works, buddy. This is just an illusion created by weak beings. These are just excuses they use, so that those who possess some power have an obligation to protect them. But while the boneheaded guy was giving this disgusting speech, he creates a giant ice scythe and sword. Guys, now things have gotten bad, man. What are they going to do now, guys? I don't know. Well, see, then the Lich tells Addis to send our protagonist to the afterlife. And if he does that, the Lich will accept him as a companion. But obviously, Addis isn't going to do that, right, guys? Instead, Addis says Hay's right. Humans see them just as monsters. But instead of giving up on living as a human and becoming something like you, even if it means I die here today, I would still prefer to live as a human. Holy crap. And there you go, guys. Now we're talking, man. Then the Lich swings the giant ice sword at them with everything. And those short words from Addis gave our protagonist a bit of hope. And he says that this life is kind of complicated. The dragon says yes, living a normal human life isn't such an easy task. But out of nowhere, our protagonist runs forward and leaps upward, saying that he too would like to live as a normal human. This makes the boneheaded guy curious, like, what do you mean? How can you leap this high, man? But he says that the only change is the fact that you will be the first to go to the afterlife. But while the Lich was talking a load of nonsense, there, our protagonist readies his stance. With just a horizontal cross-strike, and with just one swing of his sword, he destroyed everything, guys. So strong, man. This is complicated. Right, guys, Addis, with several explosions. Didn't even scratch the wall, you know, and our protagonist, with just one swing of his sword, destroyed everything, man? Well, of course, guys, with hacks. It becomes easy, right, man? And Addis is like, how is this possible, man? I'm sure it'll get to that level, this and that. But while they were talking, there, the bonehead was plotting against them. And then he used magic and trapped them in multiple tentacles. He says he didn't want to use this, but he had no choice. The bonehead says these tentacles will keep getting stronger, and they have the power to absorb their life energy. These tentacles will not let you go until you guys kick the bucket. Our protagonist is like, what do you mean, man? Didn't I completely destroy him? But Addis says that a Lich's body is composed of mana, so it can't be destroyed by physical attacks. However, the Lich says that he discovered this fact a bit too late. And if you don't want to die a painful death, tell me, how were you able to disguise yourself as a level 5? But our protagonist doesn't give a damn about that. He destroys everything with pure strength. Man, bring it on, boy. But this is a bit strange, right, guys? Because our protagonist and Addis never stated their levels. So how does the bonehead know about this? Man, sit down, because there's a story to it, guys. The bonehead says he wasn't sad when he found out he had kicked the bucket. Since his life on Earth was a piece of crap, he was more cautious in his second life. Since he couldn't afford to die, again, he had to map out a meticulous plan to manage to steal the path of the undead. He had conquered both death and fear, or at least that's what he thought. Guys, I think you guys keep thinking about our protagonist, right? Because no matter how many times he sees our protagonist fighting, he is strong as hell, man. I already told you guys, with hacks, things become too easy, man. It's incredible. Who would have thought that Eric could destroy the tentacles of what? What is it, boy? Ah, screw it. But Eric's attack isn't doing any good, guys, because every time he attacks the Lich regenerates. The bonehead gets pissed off at our protagonist, right, guys? Asking, who the hell are you and what exactly? Are you but the one who should be asking that? Question is Eric, because until today, there hasn't been a single person who figured out he was a level 5. In other words, guys, there are only two possibilities. Either the bonehead is a good psychic, or Hayes from another world, man. And, of course, after that, the bonehead runs for his life, right, guys? But did you really think our proto would let him escape? Like that? You thought wrong, man. Eric spins like a Beyblade. Over there, boom, the bonehead is trying to escape, right, guys? But where are you going? Come back here, boy, Eric. Gets furious with the bonehead, right? Because of him, many people like Eric had to suffer. But the bonehead doesn't give a damn about that. He throws an ice marionette straight at Eric, man. However, did you really think that would stop our protagonist? He tears right through the ice marionette. Therein goes after the Lich with everything, man. Addis is completely dumbfounded by our proto, right, guys? Saying that he surpassed the limits of immortals. Well, I already told you, man, with hacks enabled, it becomes easy, however. Addis says there's something strange, because a sword skill of that caliber would be impossible with only human strength. In other words, guys, this must mean Hayes, an aura user. But no matter how many times our protagonist hits the bonehead, he keeps regenerating, right, guys? The bonehead asks why our protagonist isn't using aura. By any chance? Do you want to capture me and take me to the Inquisitors? What are you talking about, boy? Stop running and come at me, boy. So activate that rear laser. Use your aura, damn it. Because the Lich's body is connected by mana. And if our protagonist doesn't use aura, he won't be able to defeat the bonehead, guys. But Eric yells there, I already understand that it's necessary to use aura, damn it. But I can't use it, damn it. Do you really think a level 5 is going to be able to use aura? Hell, he can't use aura. And of course, after hearing that, the egghead tries to attack our protagonist with everything, man. However, the Lich's attacks are useless against our protagonist. Man, seriously. But meanwhile, his friend, right there, Addis, was trying to tell our protagonist not to worry about him, right? But do you guys really think our protagonist would let Addis get hurt again, man? No way. But guys, if our protagonist can't use aura, how is he going to defeat the bonehead? Well, I don't know. Because he doesn't have time to think about it? Man. Since in this brief space of time, the Lich created a mana cannon. The Lich says that the fact that our protagonist can't use aura means his body can be harmed. You might be able to block magic, but you have no protection against mana. Then the Lich fires a blast of mana close to them with everything, however. In a brief space of time, our protagonist manages to raise a wall from the ground. Meanwhile, Addis says that this wall won't last very long. But that skeleton looks more beat up than the first time we saw him. Going over there to take a closer look. So, Eric braces himself, and bam, he charges at the Lich with everything, man, cutting the damn mana in half. And when he gets close to the dirty head, he says, crazy foreigner, it's the scenario. I feel a little bit like stealing your stuff. Joking aside, by the looks of it, guys, the bonehead's skull is cracking, right? In other words, guys, the bonehead can't regenerate. If our protagonist beats him to death, hell turned to dust, right? The Lich panics because he doesn't want to die right there, so he used an ice magic spell to try to hold our protagonist back while he runs away, but you're not going to escape that easily, boy. But why isn't the bonehead able to escape, guys? Simple, man. Before the bonehead tried to run away, our protagonist, when he heard the sound of his leg, started to strike with his sword, man. A while after our protagonist hits the bonehead, he goes to help Addis, right? So He asks Otis to change back to his human form so he can heal him. Why do you always end up naked? When you transform, damn it, shut up. And heal me already, you son of a bitch. So, before asking what happened to the bonehead, Eric says that he incapacitated the bonehead. For a while, simply put, our protagonist smashed him up in the arm, and leg of the lich turned to dust, man. Guys, if the lich doesn't have arms and legs anymore, he's barely a lich, right? And the big-headed guy is getting beaten within an inch of his life by our protagonist, man. Ah. I'm going to kill you, Eric? Says the big-headed guy shouldn't be able to use magic anymore. Right, because his bones are made of mana. And the most Eric can do is neutralize his movements. Wait, but Hay's still alive, Eric. Says that the lich's ribs are much more resilient than he thought. But Addis says that's fine, right? Because he knows how hard it is to capture an enemy without eliminating them. So Addis gets up there and hits the bonehead. The bonehead gets all pissed off at Addis, right? What is this dragon? Are you underestimating me in your human form? But Addis grabs the bone stump of his leg. Darren uses a magic spell, making him writhe in pain. Wait, guys. But Daunt likes not feel pain, so why is he feeling pain, bro? Otis says it's because a mana infusion of that amount can be a bit uncomfortable for a normal person, but for a lich, the pain must be terrible with the perfect mana loop. Then Addis tells Bonehead to tell the truth. If he doesn't want to agonize in pain, who are the companions you mentioned to me earlier? And why were you guys killing innocent hunters? All over the place, then Bonehead spits out a coin right there and says that young dragons like Addis really don't know how the world works. 1,000-year-old dragon would have already realized since they joined us. Joined who, damn it? And this coin that the lich spat out there, you guys, is the same coin that the Inquisitor asked. If our protagonists knew, called the Great Earth, let's wait for the world to be destroyed together in the world of the dead, and well, the lich blew himself up, you guys. Did the lich take our protagonist down with him? Bro, I don't know. Because, meanwhile, our little dragon was packing her bags to try and beat it, but she wasn't succeeding. Because the bag was too damn full, bro. Do I need to leave something behind? No. I don't want to. I spent so much time collecting all of this. She is leaving that place, you guys. Because too many strange things have been happening lately, right? First, a fire broke out in the forest, and the flames destroyed her garden. And when she went to turn off the lights to sleep, a piece of ice fell from the sky, bro. Furthermore, there was a huge earthquake that felt like it split the entire continent, bro. Why on earth is this happening, right, you guys? All of this is only happening because I helped that buffed gorilla. But while Effer was whimpering, someone appears behind her, and obviously, she notices right away. She said she has to leave quickly because she has a bad feeling, but when she looks, the guy was already right in front of her. You guys, F in the chat for Effer. This leaves her curious, right? How did he get here so fast, the man tells her not to be scared, since he was just looking for a friend and ended up hearing voices along the way, which is why he came over there. But Effer isn't stupid, right, you guys? She says, a friend, but no one lives around here. But the big guy says he knows, and that's why it's being difficult to find him. She says that it's already been more than a year since she last saw a human, so she can't help him. But the big guy insists, saying that she might have seen him. Yes, this friend is a skeleton. You know? Oh boy, you guys. So Bonehead is friends with this crazy guy over here? Then he is an enemy, right? So it's over for our little dragon, you guys. F for the little dragon, bro. Returning to our protagonist in Addis. A few minutes before Bonehead exploded, Addis was telling our protagonist to run away, but he ran out of air and fainted a few hours. After Bonehead exploded, you guys, some people arrived there. The redhead over there, whose name is Leslie, asks if a bomb dropped. There, what does the guide Richard say? Oh boy, you guys. If they have a guide, then they are also from another world, right? Holy shit, you guys. Is he or protagonist going to end up fighting them, bro? I don't. No, well, see, Richard says. That judging by the recent traces of mana, he would say that the magic happened about a week ago, so I misspoke, you guys. Bonehead didn't explode a few hours ago. No, it's been a week already. Which points to it having been a self-destruction by Shin Hanseo, which is Bonehead's name, right, you guys? But I will keep calling him Bonehead, right? I mean, no, I won't keep calling him that anymore because he kicked the bucket, right, you guys? This leaves the redhead. A bit curious, right? He self-destructed. Hadn't he become a lich? Because he was afraid of kicking the bucket then. That miserable guy who finished off our little dragon arrives. There, look at what a total asshole face, damn it, the redhead. Gets completely pissed off at him, right? And tries to kill him. Because she had already warned him, if he laid his hands on her, she was going to rip them right off. Holy shit, you guys. He tells her to stop because the guide was right there. I liked her. I mean, she's an enemy, right? So the name of this ugly guy here, guys, is Alejandro. Alejandro, I don't know, man. Besides being ugly, he has an ugly name. 2, man, the ugly guy, tries to annoy the redhead, right? Saying, for her to use dark soap, on him wouldn't be a bad deal. And of course, the redhead gets pissed off at him, right, guys? But before anything could happen, Richard uses his aura sword in hand to stop them. Oh, guys, could our next tank be this crazy guy? Man, I don't know, huh? I don't think so, huh, guys? And for those of you who don't know, guys, this scarred bro right here is the same one from the Inquisitor story over there, you know? But if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch part 1, damn it. So that's when Alejandro realizes, right, guys? That's where the bonehead blew himself up. Richard says that the bonehead caused an explosion that exceeded his healing capabilities. As expected, right? There's no trace of the enemy. So, please, have a minimum of respect, then the ugly guy says. Right there that it's a bit weird, right? He blew up. We already said that, bullshit. But the ugly guy says no. That's not it. He's talking about the explosion. Over there, because on his way, over there he saw an area 2 kilometers away, which was possibly where the bonehead fought. So this made the scarred guy a bit curious. Right. Could it be possible that he was moved from the battlefield while he was self-destructing? But why is it that he doesn't feel any other beautiful energy from Hanbin? Why would that be, right, guys? Simply because our protagonist kicked his head and threw it far away. Right, guys? Because the buildup of the explosion mana was in the lich's tooth. So that was why. Our protagonist kicked his head over there. Damn. But in reality, our protagonist didn't even know it was going to explode, you know? The crazy guy just kicked his head and said, go for it, son. So he says that after that, he brought Adis back, right? Because he had passed out. And since he had passed out, he went over the wall, right? Because there was no way for him to pass through the entrance, right, guys? Imagine. Passing by with a naked guy on your back? Man. And since he didn't know where Otis's house was, he brought him to the old man's office. And of course he was kicked out, right, guys? Imagine, man. Entering with a naked guy. Through the window, man, I committed a crime by accident, you know? Says our protagonist. That after that, he was hunted by the guards. So he found a group of smugglers. And was pretty busy, yeah, right, you fucking liar. But anyway, our protagonist says everything ended. Well, in the end, Adis says that he never imagined there would be a guy as powerful as Eric. He doesn't know how to thank him, and really right, guys. Imagine if Adis had been captured by the lich over there, man. It would have ended badly. For him, right? He would have bitten the dust, man. Adis says he doesn't know what would have happened to him if he had been captured by that demonic being from another world. He ended up forgetting one thing, right, guys? Our protagonist is also from another world, right, man? But he says right there that you are built different. From the others, you are not like them. But he says that it's fine, right, guys? Because in the world he lived in, it was also full of murderers. And even though he received the mission to infiltrate the Latina continent, to make the entities there bite the dust, right guys? He decided to adapt to this world and live a normal life as a human being, instead of becoming a terrible psychopath, making everyone bite the dust. So, do most of the beings from another world live here among normal people? Eric says Hayes almost sure they do, right, at least in the beginning. But on the other hand, he says that most of the other beings from another world became murderers, unlike you, right? But the only difference he has from them, right guys, is that his guide is bugged, right? I think if I stay with the guide, what are you talking about by any chance? Are you talking about the powers that beings from another world receive from the demon god? He says yes, right? That one of the powers is to see levels. And our protagonist gets thoughtful, right guys? So you're telling me there's something forcing these people from another world to send people to the afterlife. Interesting, right guys? Could there really be someone controlling this guy? Man, to send people to the afterlife, man. And he says, guys, that the reason he shows up as level 5 is because of a bad connection with his guide. He doesn't know how severe the defect is, right? So, you want to turn into a terrible rascal, sending everyone to the afterlife. Right, guys? It has to be interesting, right, man? Therefore, nothing good will come if you associate with me. Hey, said Otis. But before our protagonist walked away, Addis shouted out, my name is Addis Infiltragna, descendant of dragons, raised by the shadow entity of the valley. Among the dragon species, fire dragons are known for keeping their word. And I, as a fire dragon, promise that I will pay my debt in Ruhanbin. I promise, damn it. And from now on, I'm going to call our protagonist Ruhanbin, right guys? Much more badass man, because as you already know, right guys? Eric was his fake name, right? A while later, the old man tells our protagonist to deliver the carriage to a certain person and use the map to find the way. You should be able to pass through the city gates if you show them this document from your association of builders. The old man says, Hayes is going to send a new identity to our protagonist via an agent, so don't forget to meet him there. Okay, bye. Let's go, the old man tells our protagonist, to leave the items with the recipient and sell the carriage. But what about the money from the sale, old man? That's a small price. To send someone problematic? Like you far away. Thank you very much. Old man, I'll make sure to return the favor someday. But boy, promise me one thing. Never, under any circumstances, kill a person. It is at that exact moment that you turn into a monster. Never forget that. Okay, old man, sometime later, Richard and the others were arriving at the place where the battle of our protagonist and Addis took place. Right, guys? With the bone-headed guy there, right? And the little dragon is alive, guys. She's alive, man. I thought the wyvern-like dragon was done for. Man, Richard. Richard, man, I'm going to call this guy Scarface, man. Much cooler. Calling him Richard does nothing for me, man. This left Scarface a bit curious. Right, guys, it was there that the bone-headed guy fought a week ago, because he is only able to sense the traces of mana from the bone-headed guy, and from an inferior being, poor little dragon, guys. Because out of all things, she had to be captured right away by the Great Earth. You know it sucks, right, man? The guy says, no freaking way he would be defeated by a piece of crap magic like that. Alejandro says that the aura force reached all the way to the field, and I don't even know what the hell that is, man. Then Scarface asks if he is saying that the bone remains were crushed by mere physical force, who could have done that, right, guys? Why are you asking me that? There are some living beings that could subjugate a lich through brute force. For example, the power of a dragon that has already lived for 500 years is a power more than sufficient to turn the bones of a lich into dust. And if it's dragon blood, use a blood sample on the ground to locate it. Whoa, guys. Will they manage to find our protagonist and Addis? Man, I don't know, because we're only going to see that in the next video, guys. And you already know, right, guys? If you want part 3, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Damn it. But in case you want to see a badass work about a chubby guy, the loser who becomes a real, goes insane and smashes everyone, I recommend you guys click on this video right here, guys. No, but that's it, guys. A kiss on the butt. And until the next adventure, man.